about commonplace stuff. The two things I want to cover are the three things. Sorry, example. And I put this up for your next one. For commonplace 4, read the packet. If you haven't read through the packet I gave you that includes guidelines on how to do everything, then that's going to reflect in your commonplaces. An example is supposed to be from history, literature, or film. It's not supposed to be one you just make up saying, oh, this is like the time my mom and me went to the beach and I fell down and she picked me up and said, you're okay, be strong. And I was like, okay.
Fred.
Sorry?
Forgot Fred, like COVID coronavirus.
Well, that could work, yeah. That would be a historical example, though. But something that people recognize, that they can identify with as a community. But it really needs to be one in which people can draw, like when we talk about being wise, you give an example of Solomon. We're talking about being a good ruler and use the example of Constantine. You need to figure people can draw, like, oh, that makes sense. You're trying to make the fullest case for people to listen to your quote. Also, remember, for each section, it's a minimum of 2 sentences for each section. Okay? So if you do less than that, then I just take off points for following instructions. Okay? And so those are easy points to get. If people are doing 1 sentence, they're not writing enough to demonstrate. I think even 2 sentences is little, but I set a limit for you all. You're welcome to do more than 2 sentences, but you can't do less than that. For the analogy seems to be the trickiest bit for most people. An analogy is not just you restating your same point before, or just dropping in a quote and saying, hey, this quote says something similar, so here is how they're connected. And there's supposed to be one point of connection, usually a conceptual overlap. So for example, when Augustine in City of God talks about how God gives good things and bad things to the righteous and the unrighteous, he says, this is just like how if you put gold in the fire, it's refined, but if you put straw in the fire, it's burned up. So one common thing, fire, 2 different results, okay? Or he says if you stir a cesspit, stink rises. If you stir a jar or a container of perfume, good odor arises out of that. So one common action, stirring something, 2 different results. That's what he does with that. How many of you have, well, who has a quote that we can use? Sure.
Real quick. Pretty sure it says sin not only alienates, it enslaves.
Comparison with the point of connection, what is it? What an analogy is. So sin not only alienates, it enslaves. So you're going to need some analogy that's going to show that one thing is done, it has a double result, one being sort of more severe than the other, something like that. What's an analogy for this? In the same way that, did you come up with a good one, do you think?
Find my analogy.
Okay.
I don't remember that.
All right. That's one of the things that you're all supposed to do, is make sure that you label each of the sections. That makes it easier for me to read it, but also for you to make sure that you've done all of the Crea. Sin not only alienates, it enslaves. We had another one last class, what was it? Yeah, what'd you have?
The essence of love is self-sacrifice.
Okay. In that case, you just find you essentially just find an essence of something. Say the same with the essence of hate is wanting evil for a person. The essence of love is to. So it's at this point you're drawing out what's essential to that one item. So this is your key point for comparison. The essence. Okay. For sin not only. In a way, this is going to be your key. But not only you're going to need two components to it. Okay. What was the last one? So I go in education without moral formation. I forgot what it was. Any other ones? Sure, Emily.
I did only when we have realized and faced up to the seriousness of what we are suffering from, when we have been our urgent need for cure. My analogy was, we can bring the horse to water.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Did everybody hear that? Read your quote again.
Only when we have realized and faced up to the seriousness of what we are suffering from, will we admit our urgent need for cure.
Okay, so only when we realize the seriousness of what we're coming up against will we. Last part again.
Admit our urgent need for
Admit our urgent need for
a cure.
a cure. And so her analogy to that was you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Okay, that's a good one. Thanks. All right. So again, I'll remind you: read through the packet if you haven't done that already. Take a look at each of those components, what's supposed to be included in each of them. And if you have questions, let me know. Or the questions about commonplace now? No. Okay. Then let's talk about the Merovingians. I've got a handout for you. Let's take a look at what happens to Rome after it collapses. So what happens to the empire after it collapses? All right. Okay, so take a look at this map. We see how things sort of fall out after the Roman Empire collapses. What's left of the Western Roman Empire becomes the kingdom of Odoacer or Odovacar. That eventually will be lost and become the kingdom of Italy. The Vandals still have North Africa. That'll eventually be taken by Islamic invaders as they come through. And then the main area we'll be dealing with is up here in the northern portion of Europe. The Franks, who will eventually take over Aquitaine, so all this region down to the north of Spain. And that won't take very long for them. The Burgundians, again, that kingdom will be relatively independent, we'll see, until around the time of the 100 Years' War. And you can see as well, as you look to the north, you see Britain, it's taken by the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes, but also the Angles and Saxons and Jutes are based here in northern Europe. Anyway, so that's the way it splits up. It's now just a bunch of barbarian kingdoms, so not one unified empire, and it's got a diversity of peoples mixed into it as well. So let's take a look at the Merovingians. Before we do, I just want to make a couple of points clear to you all about the church and what's going on historically in this community. This slideshow, I've decided to edit part of it. Oh, you can't see it yet. And so I'm gonna tell you what you need to, I'm gonna pull out a few slides and shift them over to another presentation because they fit into it better. Don't write Celts and Saxons, we're just gonna deal with the Franks and the Merovingian dynasty. Okay, so this is the, after the fall of Rome. Where does the power lie? The main power shifts north to France, or to the Frankish kingdom, which is formerly known as Gaul. Yeah.
Do you have my book?
Yes, same material, so yeah.
You want us to write this?
Yes. Okay, so the Franks and the Merovingian dynasty, I'm going to put some questions. Please don't write the questions down. We're just going to talk about them, or rather, as we're reading through, we'll eventually discuss them. And so these are things to be paying attention to as we go through the presentation. Here we go. This is Charlemagne, right, being crowned. He becomes the Holy Roman Emperor when this Holy Roman Empire sort of begins, then fizzles out, and then starts up again under Otto. And it eventually becomes an election by peers, and you see this sort of tension. At first, it looks like a good thing between church and state, but eventually becomes a tension and results in what's called the Babylonian captivity of the church years later. So, you also notice quite a difference in artistic style from Frankish kingdom to when we finally get to the Renaissance, and we get lots of depth in character, difference in character as well, right? In this one, they all pretty much look the same. Yeah. They all look kind of like gnomes. Sorry?
They look like aliens.
Aliens?
Pointed heads.
Oh, okay, I thought they looked like gnomes. Yes, that'll work too. Those hats. Okay, what is his job? What's your job? Why do you get that hat? Huh?
Maybe he wants to shave.
I think. Inside in France, I don't think they need that. Okay, so again, don't write these questions, let's just talk about them really briefly. So pay attention, what are the different religious views that are in the people of Gaul or France, the Frankish kingdom in the early Middle Ages? We're going to talk about the two major churches. There's not actually two denominations. The split happens over, or rather it's not even a split, the division that we see, or the difference in practice is whether you speak Greek or you speak Latin. Okay, so the Latin rite versus the Greek rite. We're going to learn about a figure named Clovis, who's very important to the Frankish kingdoms, a figure named Clotilde as well, who is his wife, queen of the Franks. And then we're going to ask a question about this problem that led to the falling apart of the Merovingian kingdom. Okay, so, do you remember what Arianism is? What is Arianism? Sure, Will?
Don't they believe that like Jesus was made by God?
Yep, Jesus is the highest creation. It was taught by a guy named Arius. Orthodoxy, I'm going to give you this word again today just as a reminder. This means right practice, right worship rather. Okay, paganism is what? Sure.
Belief in like many gods.
Well, that's polytheism. Paganism is essentially any religion besides Christianity. It was first applied to the Roman religions, and then it became just a catch-all term for anybody who didn't worship the Christian God. So first, just dealing with orthodoxy and what that means. When I talk about these two different sets of churches, orthodoxy means right worship. That's all it means. So when I say orthodox, when I say people are Orthodox Christians, I can mean that in two ways. I can mean that they belong to what's called the Eastern Church, or I can mean that we all accept the Nicene Creed. We have the same set of beliefs, foundational beliefs. There are some variations in terms of practice, and those are variable and permitted. Okay? And I can use that in two ways. But in the church, it essentially means this. Nicene Christianity. That's all it means, that we accept the doctrine of the Trinity, the key councils of the church. That's all we're saying by that word orthodox. When it's lowercase o, that's what we mean. What does Nicene Christianity includes? It includes this: Jesus is fully God, fully man, uncreated and eternal, and we believe in the doctrine of the Trinity. So that's what we mean by orthodox. So there are certain way to worship, certain aspects of worship that have to be included, and that includes belief in the Trinity. So orthodox means Nicene Christianity. We don't do the Nicene Creed together in this class now. We do that in theology. Okay. In the East, it became the Eastern Orthodox Church. Eventually, it's really just referred to as the Eastern Church at this time. But it means the Eastern Rite Worship Church. Okay? And so we will talk about, or you will see churches that are Greek Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, Russian Orthodox. All those grow out of this movement of this rite, this practice, the way that things are done in the Greek church. Okay? In the West, I should probably do that this real quick. In the West means Catholic. Let me put this in here for you real quick. The Latin Church. So that is to say, when they're preaching, when they're teaching, when they're doing communion, all of that is happening in Latin, as opposed to in the Greek church, it's all happening in Greek. That's the division. There is no separation of the church. The church views itself as one. In fact, that's what the word Catholic means. Catholic means universal. Okay, so this designation actually doesn't quite work right here, right just yet. Okay? Because even the Eastern Orthodox would consider themselves, in the Nicene Creed, they refer to themselves as one holy, apostolic, and Catholic church. So it means one universal church. Now this split, where it's formalized, happens in 1053. Okay? 1054, I'm sorry. That's the official separation of those two churches into a church that's headed by a few archbishops and a church that's headed by a pope. And again, still, your split is linguistic. It's going to be whether they speak Latin or Greek. Now, there are going to be some Greek-speaking churches that do go with that do come under the headship of the pope. But you, at this point, have one church that speaks two languages. Does that make sense? Okay, yes.
How many popes have there been?
Let's see. How many popes have there been? I should probably just ask Siri. 170 some, I don't know. Does anybody else know?
What's the question?
Sorry?
What's the question?
How many popes have there been?
4.
No.
No, there's like 54.
No, there's more than that. Let's see.
104.
104. It's over 100. Let's see if we can find this real quick.
Let's see.
Oh, there we go. 139.
109.
No, I'm just gonna go, sorry, page 139.
177.
Let's see.
I'm going no less than 50.
Oh, no, there's lots more than that.
104.
I don't know, here's your list of all the popes.
That's 104. That looks like it. Let's say 275.
Not really count. You also have a period where there's conflicting number of popes. Let's just do this real quick. Hey Siri, how many popes have there been in the Catholic Church? Oh, just tell me the number. lots. We'll actually look at the papacy when we do more in the Middle Ages, and that'll actually be part of one of the things we're going to work with. Now you're not going to have to look at memorize or anything like that. It's just going to be about the rule of the church, especially during what's called the Babylonian captivity of the church. Okay, so I like to say this is what's going on. There is one church, two languages. And then you have some variation in the British Isles as well, that when the church will be separated essentially for years, and it'll come back and it will accept the Roman rite, but it's still very, we can say very sort of Celtic in its style of worship. Maintains that. I'm going to skip a few slides that I need to, oh, that's good. What happens next? The Western Empire divides into smaller barbarian kingdoms. That's what you saw from the map, right? We see that we have the Vandals in North Africa, we have the Visigoths in Spain, we have the Franks and the Burgundians in the region that's now modern-day France, Odovacar, and then the Kingdom of Italy we see based in Italy. Eventually, we'll see the Lombards come down out of more Eastern Europe and try and take over Italy. Italy actually sends for help to France. Anyway, that's what happens. The Eastern Empire is going to continue, though, until 1453, when it's destroyed by, anybody know? What military or what army destroys the, yeah?
Ottoman Turks.
Yeah, the Ottoman Turks, 1453. So that's, I mean, the Roman Empire lasts from 27 BC to 1453 AD. It's quite a successful empire, even though the city of Rome itself was lost. This is important, both for what I was going to talk about next, but I've decided to shift to another unit on what happens with Britain, but also what's going to happen in these former Roman territories like Gaul, that now becomes the Frankish kingdom of the Merovingians and the Carolingians. Because we'll see the way that it begins to affect culture, but also the way the culture tries to make the gospel fit with what they want to do. I mean, you see that to an extent when you read Beowulf, and there's lots of sort of Christian language, but also certain themes that match up with Anglo-Saxon views of the world that don't quite square with what the gospel says. That's right, a heavy emphasis, for example, on vengeance that seems to not square with what the gospel says. Okay, I'm going to skip this. Please don't do this. I've decided to move this to another unit. Talk about St. Patrick a little bit, but not yet.
Was the guy with like the little leprechauns?
He the guy with the little leprechauns. He did live in Ireland.
You got like captured.
He was captured. Yeah, he was captured by all people by Irish pirates, which I've never thought of as Irish as being pirates, and enslaved for a number of years. Escapes, then goes back to preach to those who enslaved him. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. So that fits better. The reason why I'm setting that aside is it fits better under a different unit. And I dropped it in here because I'm trying to run a simultaneous history course because all these things are happening in France and in Rome, but at the same time, all these things are lots of things are happening over in the British Isles, but it's just easier if we put all that material together. So, the Franks, beginning with the guy named Clovis I, he's the first ruler of the Merovingian dynasty. Where are we? We are in the Roman province of Gaul, populated by a group of people known as Gallo-Romans, and by Franks. Who's the great conqueror of Gaul? Anybody remember? Julius Caesar. Okay? So, it's populated by two major people groups. Do you have a question, Will? Two major people groups. The Gallo-Romans and the Franks, and they're different in custom, but they're also different in religion. And we'll see what that looks like in just a minute. Clovis. Clovis is king of the Franks. He reigns for a good 30 years, which is a good amount of time. Remember, we've seen when typically when a ruler gets a lot of time, then you get stability, peace, things like that. Octavian, for example, Constantine. We'll see with Charlemagne as well. Theodosius, how long did he reign? He wasn't that long. Clovis is a Frankish king who rules for a good stretch of time. The unfortunate thing for the Franks, the political policy was essentially murder your rivals even if they're your relatives. Now, they will enact a policy that tries to deal with this, but it just becomes a mess. We'll talk about that in just a minute. What do you think the religion? There's two people groups, so there's at least two religions. What do you think the religions are?
Christianity.
Muslims aren't a group yet, right? They haven't. Islam hasn't begun.
Christianity.
Christianity.
Buddhism.
No, not Buddhism. It's going to be, for the Gallo-Romans, they're going to be Catholic. They're going to be Nicene Christians. Okay? And for the Franks, they're going to be pagan or they're going to be Arian. So that's sort of the mix of the peoples now. Pagan or Arian peoples, and then the Roman or the Catholic Christians who are Gallo-Romans.
Did the Arians have like different Bibles and stuff?
No, they didn't. Use the same Bible. Now, slowly we'll see Arianism here is concerned. Remember, Arians are exiled, so they go out to all the frontier territories, like the Frankish kingdoms, like with the Visigoths, the they're out on the borders. Eventually, it's going to be completely crushed as they become part of the former Roman Empire. Okay.
Wait.
Hmm?
Oh, is it gonna switch slides?
Oh, yeah. We've already looked at the map. I'll pull up this map again just so we can see where all this is happening. The former Roman Empire and what we have now. Okay. Sorry. I mean, again, the craziness of all the arrows, but let's boil it down to this, right? This is the Visigoths. You'll see, different from your map, this territory is all going to be taken by the Frankish kingdoms. This is going to be a major player in the Crusades, right? Because when the Muslims conquer the Arabian Peninsula, they then move this way and take all of North Africa. And it's just a short gap. What are you reading now in literature?
Song of Roland.
Okay, there's a small gap, so this is the Song of Roland. Small gap between here and here. They take all of this region. It was formerly Christian kingdom, part of the Roman Empire, and so the Franks here, they've got this small territory here that's like a buffer zone, and they just begin pushing further south because they want all the territory. Yeah.
Where is the Garden of Eden near that place?
Oh, it's somewhere over in the east, so further this way, we won't be able to see it. Joining the Tigris and Euphrates and so on.
Wait, is there no one settled where that white part is? Like here, like there's like the Visigothic kingdom and the Frankish kingdom.
Oh, here?
Yeah.
No, there's going to be some. Look at the map. I've got the map here. It's the Kingdom of the Suebi. I have no idea who that is. So you see, I mean, it even points out this is where these people go. They end up, when the Franks take over, they actually split this into three pieces, and only this really belongs to the Muslims for a stretch, and then they push them out of there as well, and to retake all of Europe. And then it's like, well, we've done that. What now? Crusade. And so they all head to the Middle East, to Israel in particular. Okay. This will become the major player. In addition to that, as you've seen, the Song of Roland in the conquest of the British Isles, and then we'll see again a conflict there because you have all these Franks or the Normans rather going from here to here, and those being rulers who are based in here, moving to this place, then saying, well, I'm king here, but I also have territory there, so I'm king of both places, and that's when the 100 Years' War essentially begins. but that's again not for a good stretch of time. Why is Clovis so important? Here he is, Clovis being baptized. What do you notice about this engraving, this ivory engraving?
He's like in some like a small background.
Yeah. I think that's just a problem. Yeah, it's a small tub. I think that's in part just a problem with, that we see with medieval art, is that it's not very good at doing depth or scale. Those sorts of things are missing. What else do you notice about it?
It's
He's
gold.
older.
It's older. Yeah. Good.
There's 2 priests.
Yeah, 2 priests performing the baptism. I assume this is another ruler who's present there. What else do you notice?
There's something above his head.
What is it?
A bell.
It's a bird.
Oh.
Does that sound familiar? You heard a story about somebody getting baptized and a bird descends. Baptism of Jesus, right? So this connection being made between this person who becomes a Christian, right, in this event. This is him becoming a Christian. It's not, he makes a profession of faith. He is becoming a Christian in the baptism. And so, but I believe that the dove is carrying an oil for christening. And so that would be, again, this other connection, right, with the Messiah being an anointed one, this one being an anointed one.
Do you think he was like Jesus or something?
I don't think he thinks that, but he's continuing that line of faithful rule as a king, as a Christian king, is what he believes. So, why is he important? He married a Catholic woman. He was himself a pagan. And we'll talk about her in a little bit. In the midst of a battle, he cries out to Jesus for help, and he's successful. And so as a result, we're going to read through this story together. Actually, we've got a good excerpt on the story of Clovis. In the midst of, in the aftermath of it, he has himself and his men all baptized. And he's not sure what they're going to think because they've all been pagan all these years. And he says, his wife's like, you should have them baptized. And he's got the advice of a bishop. The bishop says you should have them baptized. And he says, I don't know how they'll feel about that. So he announces it to his men, and they all say, yes, we want to be baptized too. Okay? What's important about this is that his partnership with the church is going to characterize the relationship of the church and the state in Europe through the Middle Ages. Sometimes the partnership is going to be good and happy and pleasant, like with Merovingians and the Pope, or with Charlemagne and the Pope. But sometimes it will be terrible, like during what's called the Babylonian captivity of the church, when the French king says, I want more French popes. And he sends some of his guards to go and rough up the current pope. They do, they beat him up, and he dies 2 weeks later. And then they name a pope who's from France. And as the pope from France is going to Rome, his guards show up along the way and say, hey, you know what? You could be pope here in France instead. Let's do that. And so he's been based in France for about 80 years. Okay. That's why Clovis is important. Right? So we're seeing the, let's say, conversion of pagans. It's happening at this point in time. Right, we talked about the spreading of the gospel. That's an important aspect of what's going on here. So it's going out. Nations are being Christianized, and then also joining up with church and state. Okay. Next. Oh, there you go. There's a better picture. Look, there's the dove with the jar of oil to anoint this guy king.
This guy looks like he's.
You wore like a.
It looks like he's 10. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
He does look little. This is one of the things that when we do Renaissance art, you'll see there's a change in the realism of art, especially the people like Caravaggio.
You wore a crown going underwater. Like, what if you lost it?
I mean, he can probably find it. He's in a tub. It kind of looks like almost like he's being cooked, though. This is the stand, but it looks like smoke, doesn't it? I don't know. Someone asked in the last class, what do the symbols mean? I don't know. I'm pretty sure these, but it is important that you see in this, that this is medieval art, that you do already have a very, the clothing and the materials that are associated with the priestly class are already set, and it's very highly ornate already. This is by, what, the 8th century, not later than that, right? The bishop's wearing a mitre, he's got his crook, right? The idea of the crook, though, is that it's like a shepherd's staff. He's supposed to be the shepherd of his people.
Oh, what is this like on? Is this like on like a?
I think this is a manuscript, so it's a book.
book?
Yeah. We could look it up sometimes, figure it out. All right, Clotilde, his wife. She lives for a good long time, for 78 years. Here's what we know about Clotilde. She was born a Roman, a Gallo-Roman. Her mom was a Gallo-Roman Catholic, an aristocrat, upper class. Her dad is an Arian, a weird pairing of people. Two different approaches to Christianity. But she's upper class, he's upper class. Remember, Burgundy is this region that doesn't belong to the Franks. The Franks do want to form relationships with them. The weird thing about the Frankish kingdoms is that the Frankish kingdoms are actually German. And so when we think of the French, we don't think of Germans. Anyway, so her life isn't great. I mean, yes, she's an aristocrat, but her uncle kills her dad and her mom, sends her sister off to a convent to be a nun, and basically imprisons her for her adult life until Clovis swoops in to save the day. Yeah. She eventually becomes a Frankish queen. She's also, in this tradition, a saint. This really should be shifted up to here. I don't know, I have it arranged this way. Her uncle kills her parents, her sister's exiled, and she's a prisoner for life until Clovis comes and rescues her from her uncle.
You had a picture of her?
Yep. Coming up. So yeah, I could do this differently. I would shift this up here, right here. It's a little rewording. It's a little clunky right now, so I apologize for that. But she's important because in the way, so Clovis does save her from this lifestyle, but she saves him because she's the major influence on him becoming a Catholic Christian. She keeps encouraging him, you need to abandon these ways, you need to abandon this, and he says, okay, you know, that'll do.
Is she the first one to sing?
No, she's not the first female saint. The first one, I believe, is Blandina. Mary's technically not a saint. She's Theotokos, she's considered Mother of God. So it's different. Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, picture of Clotilde's coming up. You don't see, and you see in the imagery that the icon that's painted of her, you can see the important emphasis on who she is in her life, what she's accomplished. Again, we'll read a text about Clovis and Clotilde, and then we'll move on from this into the Carolingians. The Merovingian dynasty doesn't last very long. It's powerful, and there is some sort of ongoing influence, but they're not the most long-lasting dynasty. There you go, Clotilde. What's she holding in her hands? A church. So this queen, right, she's got her crown, who rules with concern for, or is influenced by the church. Okay. Okay. Clotilde, Queen of the Franks. Okay, the dynasty, Merovingian dynasty. That is what Clovis rules. It is named after his grandfather, Merovech, but he's the main ruler. Can you see Merovingian? Can you read that okay? There you go. Merovingian dynasty. There's not a lot of names we're going to do through this set. When we get to the Carolingians, there's going to be a lot of important figures, especially this from this group known as the Major Domo. It's named after his, so when people say if Clovis is so important, why is it called the Merovingian dynasty? It's because it really starts with his grandfather. There is very little unity or peace. There's also this problem. The kings divide their kingdoms equally among their sons. What is wrong with that? What problem do you foresee? Sure, Reese?
They're all gonna fight.
They're gonna fight for power, and also, if you start splitting it up, eventually you don't, if you split it amongst your sons, and they split it amongst their sons, you're just getting it like smaller and smaller pieces each time. Someone raised last class, what if your parents give you like a junky piece of land too? Like, here's a swamp, there you go, that's your kingdom. So, sometimes brothers get along, sometimes they don't. And so we'll see that they either left each other alone or they constantly fought. Until one major domo, a guy named Pepin the Short, said he starts working furiously to get all these different kingdoms united into one, or at least to have some sense of order. And as he's doing all of this work, he's basically the mayor of the house is what his title means. He's observing the king does nothing, and so he approaches the Pope and says, who should be in charge? Should it be the person who does all the work, or the person who is said that they're in charge? And the Pope says, the person who does all the work. He goes, oh, that's me. I would like to be king now. And so that's how the transition sort of happens. Again, obviously a compressed story of what actually happened. But the result is by 600, there are 200 kings. That's quite a lot of kings. And so this is the problem Carolingians will have to deal with when they eventually come into power. More. There you go. Now this is kind of true. So take this with a grain of salt. There are some kings in the Merovingian tradition who are known as the do-nothings. It is not all of them, but they do become less and less effective because of this, because of the size. And eventually, towards the end of it, they'll reverse this under Pepin the Short, who says we need to unify and work together instead, and we're going to be in charge, and you do what I say, or else. Okay? But they do become less effective to a degree. I will do, I think I'll stop there for today because you're caught here where the other class finished 5 after. Other questions about any of this stuff or anything else? Okay. Goodbye.